some watercolour background effects. Each of the examples is quick and easy to paint, and they're really effective. I'm just about to start on the painting, but I want to work out the background before I actually do the main painting itself. So I've got some scrap watercolour paper here. I've divided it into 4 sections. What I want to do is try 4 different types of background using the same 3 colours, i.e. Payne's Grey, Indian Red and Ultramarine Violet. Okay, so those 3 colours there. And we'll see what we can do with that. So let's have a quick go on the first one. What I'm thinking of is a very mottled background here, but very blended as well. So not too defined, just a gentle blend using these 3 colours I've got within my mixing palette here. So first thing I want to do is wet the paper first of all. And when you're wetting the paper, you want to wet it 2 or 3 times. That's because you want it to soak into that paper. Once it's soaked in a little bit, you can see the texture of the paper showing through more. Then put another layer of water on, let that soak in, and do it 3 times like that. Then once that 3rd layer is soaked in, your paper should be sufficiently wet and ready to receive the paint. Now that should be sufficiently soaked into the paper, and when you look at that, got a bit of a shine. Just get it on the board there. There you go. Got a little bit of shine on the paper, and that's all I want, just a very small amount of shine. So it's soaked into that paper quite well. And by the way, this is one by De La Rowney, and it's Aquafine, not my usual paper, but I do use it for trying out ideas on. So it's well worth buying some of the cheaper pads of paper, just to save your higher quality stuff that you've got. Just make sure that's soaked in sufficient, there which it is. Okay, let's go for a little bit of the Ultramarine Violet. Ready for this? Look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh no. Leave gaps in between, that's all I'm doing here. And I don't want this too dark. Allow it to blend into that water. I know, lovely, isn't it? A lovely colour. Have some areas which are slightly wider in patches than others. And if you want to, have some areas which are a little bit deeper in tone as well, like that though. Sometimes some artists kind of deepen the corners as well. But basically what we're looking for on this one, a little bit of a mottled background. And when you're working on a background, don't spend too long on it, okay? Now my paper is on a slight angle, so that means it's running down the paper all the time. This is a little bit of that Indian Red. So I'm going to pop some of this in there. Look how strong that is. It's far, far too strong. So we can repair that. We can lift some paint off like that. Just wipe it on some kitchen roll, like that. Well, there you go. Easily sorted. And then you can add a little bit more of that Ultramarine Violet into that as well. Just kind of merge it together. Blend it. Allow it to blend. Now, as I said, don't want this too dark. So I'm just going to put some colour on there first of all, like so. Okay, something like that will do. That's plenty. Let's go for the Payne's Grey. And we'll add a little bit of Payne's Grey in places as well, but not too much. Again, darken 1 or 2 little corners here and there. Just a little bit here and there. Something like that will do. Just to blur it. And if we leave it to kind of dry on its own, these will naturally blend together. However, I might encourage this one a little bit. So a clean damp brush, and just very lightly, small circle motions like that, look. Just go over the top of the colours. Just gently blending, using the side of the brush like that. That's all I'm doing, look. Wash the brush out, otherwise just moving paint around all the time, aren't you? Very lightly blend it together, but not completely. And you find it will naturally blend as it starts to dry as well. But if you say to yourself, right, I don't want to spend any more than probably, I don't know, 5 minutes maximum working on the background, that should be enough because that paint will start to dry. What you need to think about when you're working on the background is where you started adding that paint first, because that will obviously be the place where it will dry the first. So because of that, you've got to think about it that way around. I started up there, well, it's going to dry quicker than down there, because this is the last place I went to. So think about it like that. And that is basically it. I know, that's so simple, isn't it? And what you can do with that, you can add more pigment in there if you wanted to. You can lift a little bit of paint off in places just to lighten with a damp, clean brush whilst it's nice and wet. When it starts to dry and the shine starts to go off the paper, that's when you want to stop. Because you find you start to leave what's called cauliflower marks in place of this area, which is quite nice in some ways. But I just want a nicely blended piece of paper there. Just a basic looking background, that's all we're after. Right, okay, we just need that one to dry. Right, let's work on the next one. Now the next one, I'm going to go for the same idea but closely mottled instead of quite loose like that. I've already wetted this down 3 times as per usual. I'm going to drop the paint in there, weaken this down now, this colour. So add a little bit more water to it as well. Leaving gaps in between using the side of the brush. Just quite random really. I mean, if you wanted to, the good thing about this is that you can have more purple on one end, a little bit more Payne's grey on the other end, so you can really vary it as you add the colours onto the paper. Okay, so nicely mottled. That's what we're looking for this time. Quite closely mottled really. Plenty of that. Let's go straight into the Indian red. And this is where the colour gets a bit more intense. But the good thing about colours is that you can mix them on the paper. You know, when it's quite bright like that, yes, it will obviously fade a little bit paler than that, which it will. But you can mix them on the paper and just change that colour property a little bit if you want to. You know, so it's quite easy to do in that sense. As I'm picking up the purple on the paper, this lovely ultramarine violet, you can see this colour now changing, which it is. And if you find, you think, well, actually, I think I'll add a little bit more colour over there. You can go back into the violet colour, the ultramarine violet, and add a little bit more over the top, and just keep going backward and forward as long as you maintain the wetness throughout the painting. That's what matters the most, really. A bit more intense down there, a little bit more intense down there. Then we'll go for the Payne's grey, a little bit deeper in tone now, as you can see here. And mix that with that lovely Indian red. Look at the changing colour as well. Sort of warms that Payne's grey up, but the Payne's grey being a cool sort of blacky colour, isn't it? You can change that as much as you want to and get it weaker as you start to bring that colour up. Just by changing it a little bit here and there, mixing that paint obviously on the paper. That's all I'm doing. Slightly dark in one corner. And this is a little bit closer, as you can see, compared to that one. I'm keeping the dots closer together. I'm not going to merge all this together. Not too much, not this time around. And I might just darken one corner a little bit more. Why not? Let's just do it. Eh? Leaving gaps in between. So this is a really handy technique to work with when you want the suggestion of just a very pale suggestion of detail in the background, really, more than anything. So it's well worth playing with the colours like that, mixing them on the paper when you're working with backgrounds like this one here. I know, I love it. Absolutely love it. Let's get a bit more of the Indian red in there, shall we? I know, look at that. Lovely and warm, isn't it? What a warm colour that is. In fact, I'm going to increase this down the bottom. Oh, look at that. It's gone. It's gone mad now. It's gone mad. I've lost the plot completely now, though. But this is why you play with the colours first. You test them on the paper. A bit more Payne's grey in there. Mix it together. Change that colour property. Play with those colours. And remember, as soon as it starts to dry, then you want to stop. Because that's when you start to get those cauliflower marks. Unless you want them, of course, for different effects. Entirely your choice. So that'll give us some ideas. Using the same technique, add a little bit more pigment this time round. But instead of bluing it all together, just very lightly, and having it pale, you can see I've increased the amount of paint, I've increased the amount of pigment I've placed on the paper. And also the amount of dots. And you'll also find when it's not far from just turning into semi-dry, then you find that's when you can add a little bit more colour over the top. And that colour won't blend quite as far. So it's all about trying to get the paper drying times. And you got to think, well, if it's starting to dry and it soaks that paper a little bit, like it's gone on that side now, that's when you want to add a little bit more colour in there. It will still blend a little bit, but not as far. It won't spread all the way across. It won't go mad. So there's another way of controlling the paint as you add the paint to the paper. So there you go. Same idea again, but this time a little bit more intense and less blended. But try this with different colours, and I would suggest not to use any more than probably 3 colours for a background. Sometimes I may go to 4, but normally I try to stay with about 3. Otherwise it can look a little bit too busy on the colours. Especially when you want your main focus to be on the subject. You know, if you're painting a fox, for example, and you want that main focus to be on the fox, you don't want the background fighting with the fox, do you? You want the background just in the background, out the way, but complementing that fox as well. So what I would do is very often use similar colours to what you see within the fox, but a little bit cooler, much paler, and work with that idea. There you go, that's another one done. So work on the next one down here, and that's going to be working with splattered water. Really? Yeah. We'll do the same thing again. This time we'll get splattering. So I'll see you in a minute once I've got all the colour down there on the paper ready to go. And I'll show you what I mean by the splattering technique. Now I've applied some more colour, as you can see. Quite dark actually this time around on purpose. And that's because I'm going to be using water splatter. Now water splatter, you want the paper to be in between really wet and dry. I know, it's difficult to kind of guess, isn't it? But you want it to just about going off, where you've got the shine on the paper still, but it's not quite as shiny as it is when it's really, really wet. So what you're going to do, get an old brush. This is an old stiff bristle brush, which I use some mixing with. It's an old acrylic painting brush and some water, like that. Take some of that water off by tapping on some kitchen roll and then flick it with your fingers like this lot. Alright. If you find it's still too wet, you will find that this doesn't blend quite as well. It doesn't give you the same effect. Take some of that water off and then flick. Now this will be wetter down here because my board, as I say, is on an angle. And to give you more of a kind of starburst effect as it starts to dry. Because that will all spread out. You just see that these little particles and little dots are starting to spread. And the more loaded the brush is, the wider and the larger the areas will be. So a little bit more down there. So I'm going to let this dry a little bit more, and we'll do the same thing again. Now when you compare to the other two examples, look at the small marks it's starting to create by using this water splatter. So I'm going to let it go off that a little bit more, a little bit drier. Not quite dry though, then I'll add a few more little splatters over the top. Right, let's try that again now. Slightly drier. We'll see what effect we get from that. A bit more down the bottom here. It's not dry though. Don't want it to be dry. And you want this to be like a, say like a starfield constellation. You can just put a line across there. If you skim it from the side like that, then you find it just fire across the paper and you get these like starburst effects as it goes across the paper. So there's different ways you can do this, or just do it directly from above and have larger blobs here and there, as I say, and smaller ones in other places. But whilst that's drying, I'm going to do the same thing over here again. Get some colour on the paper for you, ready and waiting to go. And we'll add just some suggestion of faded detail in the background and some more splatter, but this time with a little bit of colour, okay? Now let this one dry, well, nearly dry, because it's just starting to go off now. So the shine on the paper is still there. I can just pick this up a minute. So we've got the shine on the paper, as you can see, but it's just starting to go off, just starting to dry. And this is where you can start to play with that as well. So what I'm going to do, wash that brush out first of all, give it a good old rinse out, dry it on some pretty cleanish kitchen roll, and I'm going to take some paint off. So let's think about a branch coming down from the side here, or up from the side should I say, and it's going to gradually get slimmer. Take some paint off, remember, as it whirs its way up. Now we want a suggestion of just a faded detail in the background. That's all we're after, lot. Something like this. There you go. And then the branch tapers off that way. And this will just fade as it dries, you know. And that's the good kind of thing about working with the drying times of paper. So it's getting to know the paper that you used and how well it works. So that's just by lifting paint off, as you can see, and the effect that you can get from that straight away. However, you can add more detail in. So you can get a little bit of paint, and you can add a little bit of suggestion of detail in there as well, like so. Just an idea really on how things can look. A little bit wider at the bottom. Think about how trees grow if you're going to paint trees like this. They grow from the ground up, so therefore you're going to paint them from the ground up. And taper each branch out to just a thin little twig as it goes along, something like that though. And this can work quite well within the background of a picture. Again, it depends on the subject you're painting. So it depends on the detail that you need. If you don't want it to detract from your main subject, then just be careful how much detail you add within a background like this. Now this is a little bit drier on this top here, so therefore it's going to be sharper on the detail. So you have to remember that as well. The drier it is, the sharper the detail will be. Something like that. Okay, just do another one over the top of this faded branch there. Why not? Just a bit of fun. A few little flicks and twicks here and there. What's a twick? Something like that. There you go, that's quite effective. Then what you can do, you can get splattering, but this time with colour. So if I just cover up some of the other areas a minute so I don't splatter everywhere else at the same time. Something like that will do. Let's get my old mixing brush again. And let's go for a little bit of Payne's Grey. And like we did with the water, just very lightly, just splatter like that. Very lightly. Just create extra effects on the paper, that's all you're after. And this is another good way of kind of working with a background, but more of a sort of a faded background. So semi-detail. And as I say, you can see the difference where it's a little bit drier for this twig here, this branch, compared to down here, where it's a little bit wet. And I wouldn't dry this with a hairdryer, I'd let it dry naturally and let it blend and soak in there. So let's get some more of the Indian red and do the same with that one. I'm not using any other colours. This works really well with white paint as well, by the way. So if you want some like floaty bits in the air that you very often see on a summer's day, don't you? Floating around. And you can do the same thing with that. I said a little bit of watercolour white or white gouache. Anything like that will work really well. But when you're working with a dark background, just remember though, that the subject matter, if you're working with say a very light coloured bird, so like a white bird or very white or pale barn owl for example, a darker background will probably work quite well because then that white will stand out. Whereas if you're working with a dark animal, dark bird or dark dog, whatever you're painting, then therefore you want to think about a paler background. Otherwise it'll just tend to fight with that animal, won't it? So I'll give you some general ideas on just 4 different ways of looking at adding a different background. And try different colours out. Try different ideas out. Try and control the dryness of the paper. If you want it really, really blended, have the paper nice and flat and then have that on really wet paper and that just spread out everywhere and blend really well. So until next time around, have fun with playing with different ideas like this. And one last thing, get them brushes wet, okay? Bye for now.